Hello and welcome to another episode of Zero BS Estate Agency. Today I'm interviewing Alex Pelosi-Buchanan. Now, Alex believes that the one thing that truly maximises the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property is the individual person, specifically the individual agent that is dealing with the sale. Alex explains factors like pricing, marketing and promotion, etc. are important, but ultimately it comes down to the skills, experience and negotiation abilities of the agent managing the sale. He stresses the importance of selecting the right agent through a thorough job interview process rather than going with whoever promises the highest valuation. Alex warns against things like overvaluing, low fees, exaggerating buyer interest and long contracts as tactics used by agents to win business but not necessarily get the best results. He advocates finding an agent who will provide exemplary, personalised service and have the seller's best interests in mind throughout the process. So in summary, Alex believes that the human element, the individual agent is the key factor to maximising a home's value over and above other considerations. He argues a skilled, ethical, client-focused agent makes all the difference in negotiating top dollar. I couldn't agree with him more. It's the individual agent that truly maximises the property's value in Alex's view. Alex, welcome to Zero BS Estate Agency. So what is the one thing that truly maximises the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
Well, for me, John, I mean, there's a number of things. I think that, you've got to look at marketing, you've got to look at pricing, promotion. But I think all those things will factor into the end result and get the best result for the client. But for me, I think it always comes back round to people. I think for me, it's about the person that's dealing with it, because I think it's the agent that meets the client that sets the price, that controls the marketing, that controls how the advice that we give, how we negotiate. All of that is done by a person. And I know people say, oh, it's value. It could be value, it could be pricing, it can be marketing, but all of that ultimately is controlled by us, and it's a people-based industry. Very much when you're going to the appraisal, I mean, I don't like to call it a valuation because I don't think it's a valuation. That's not what we're there to do. It's a job interview. So yeah, for me, it's not a valuation. When we go to see the client, I try to think of it not as a valuation. That isn't really our job. We're there to advise the client and to give advice on marketing and strategy and advice on what the market's doing. Because we know in most cases, agents very rarely get the valuation right, in my opinion. I think there are lots of cases, especially at the moment, when you look at the number of price reductions that are happening, and the market we've just been through, the amount of properties that would sell for over their marketing price or their asking prices, however you want to look at it. So I do think in a lot of cases, and even when people say, oh, we got the full asking price in 24 hours, well, what's to say if you put it on for another 10 grand more, you might have got that price as well. So did the agent get the value of the property right? So it's a very subjective. And so I think that it's really what it is. It's a job interview, and that's what sellers, if you're getting agents out to value your home and that's what you think they're there for, try and reset that mindset and think they're not there to give you a valuation. It's a job interview, because you're figuring out who do you want to work with for the next 6 months, because you're going to be literally working side by side, and this person could be sat in front of you making all the promises in the world. But again, it comes down to the person. Do you trust them? What is it going to be like to be working with this person? And, I think in a lot of cases, people will go with someone because they gave them a slightly higher valuation in inverted commas, and actually then find out it's an absolute nightmare. And I think that there are lots of things that people can look at, and I've got a few tips for people to look out for when they are meeting with agents, but it all revolves back around to the person and that person dealing with it, because they could be a great negotiator. They could be amazing at negotiating, but they might be really bad at taking photos. They might be really bad at, trying to create leads and viewings. They could be really bad at, sales progression. So, there's all these things that, it all comes back round to that person and all the people that are dealing with it.
Yeah. So let's cover off one thing first. Job interview. Why do you say job interview?
Well, it's the interview for the job for selling your home. That is literally it. You are sitting them down on a sofa or at the dining table, and this is someone. I mean, would you? It's a bit like, imagine if you were going for a procedure. You're going to see a doctor and you're trying to decide who do you trust to do this operation. And you might think, well, I'm going to go see a couple of doctors and maybe get some different advice from different people. And people do. If it's something life-changing that people think, I want to make sure I'm in the right hands, people do sit down with a couple of different surgeons, and they want to hear and feel that they're going to be in the right pair of hands, because in that life, it could be sometimes a life or death situation. So it's not to say that selling a house is life or death, but it's the same principle, that you want to make sure that that person is going to have your back, and that that you're going to be in safe hands, and they're going to get you the result that you need for you and your family. And I think, too often people just, I always say to people, look, it's going to be about an hour to an hour and a half of the appointment. And if they say, oh, well, we only want 20 minutes, we just want you to kind of say, look, well, that's probably not going to work for me. I think sometimes people's perception is, get the agency, we'll line them up half an hour after each other, job done, whoever gives us the lowest fee and the highest price will go with them. Some people that works, majority of it doesn't, but unfortunately that's people's perception of what the agent does. It's just to give you a valuation and to tell you what the fee is going to be, and everything else doesn't matter because it's going to go on Rightmove anyway, and Rightmove sells houses. But I think agents as a whole, I think we're partly to blame for that perception. For many years, I think we gave the power that we put branding everywhere that was all about Rightmove, and so sellers a lot of time. I even still get people comment to me that, well, Rightmove sells a house. Rightmove doesn't sell the house. It's the auto trader for houses. It's the equivalent. All it does is advertise them. It's just like the old days of putting it in the newspaper. It's the same thing, but unfortunately, a lot of people just perceive, well, as long as the agent's on Rightmove or they're online, it doesn't really matter. And that's really where that's up to the person, again, and the agent to show the value and actually what a different person can bring. And to do that, you have to interview them. You have to ask them probing questions. One of the biggest questions I tell people to ask is, the person that you're sat down with on that appraisal meeting or that meeting, will it be you that will be dealing with the offers? Because very often what you'll find is, and this is one of the reasons, that I think that, for me, I'm going out self-employed, being on my own, is I feel I can bring so much more value, because in a lot of bigger estate agencies, especially in the bigger corporates, is that the person going out to win the business is on the biggest salary. They are the branch managers or the branch valuers, and they're driving around in the best cars. Yet the person who's actually going out and doing the viewings and dealing with the offer could be an office junior who's only been doing the job for a couple of weeks. Yet they've got no ability to negotiate. They haven't been shown how to negotiate. They're just told, take the offer and give it to the client. So there could be, I think the difference between a good agent and a bad agent could be 10% of the market value. So when people are sitting there going, oh, this agent's another 0.25% more than this agent, or this person's a whole 2% more than this other agent, that doesn't matter, because if the agent doing it for 1,200 quid set fee is going to put you with an office junior who's literally just started last week, I reckon they could probably end up underselling the property, because they'll be saying all the wrong things. You've got to negotiate. So many elements to negotiating. But so I think in a lot of cases, things like giving away, oh, well, we haven't had any other offers. Or saying, giving the game away too early about what the vendor would accept. I've been there. I've asked the question, what will the seller take? And they've just openly told me, I've been like, just throw 20k of your vendor's money away. So I do think there's so much you need to be asking those crucial questions. And I've got a whole list of questions. I'm not going to give them all away, but there are a whole list of questions I really do think people should be asking on every agent they meet. They should be asking a whole heap of questions to basically put them to the test. Do they know their stats and facts? So I think there is so much, that you can do on that job interview.
And that's right, because if a seller was actually going to get married and have an event at a church or maybe a hotel later, they're going to be doing their due diligence on whether that event organizer can truly organize an event. And the same way a job interview is that ultimately when we're employing people for a position within our company, we want to absolutely know that that person has the skill set, the relevant skill set to be able to achieve what they say they can achieve. And we will double and triple check it. And what you're saying is that when someone comes to sell their house, in order to maximize the value of their home, they have to treat the sale of their home as, one, a big event, but also do they have the right actual employee ultimately taking them on that journey?
100%. And, you know, they all say how moving home is one of the most stressful things you will ever do. And, you know, people say, oh, I'll do it myself, you know, and there are lots of models out there. You can go and put your house, you can list your house for free, do it yourself. Some people will succeed, but again, a lot of people will just find it like the worst thing they could have done. And I think that's where it comes back to the value of an agent. And people say, oh, do you really need an agent these days? And no, some people don't. You don't have to use an agent. I tell people you could put a board outside the house yourself and probably sell it. But are you going to get the best price? Do you really want to be doing all the viewings? Do you want to be dealing with those awkward phone calls about, you know, something's come up on the survey or whatever it may be? Do you want to be dealing with those calls yourself? Or would you rather have someone, like you said, who's got the skill sets and the ability and the experience of knowing how to manage those situations when they present themselves? And that's really what an agent should be doing. But again, if you're going to chuck it on with an agent who's doing it for a low fee, who you're number one of 100 houses they've got on the market, are they going to have the time to give you that personal attention? Or do you just become another number on the board that, oh, if that one falls through, well, you know, oh, well, on to the next. Yeah, and I think in a lot of cases, that's literally what it's like. It's like throwing mud at the wall and hoping some of it sticks. You know, literally, I think that's how a lot of estate agencies, it's like a sausage factory. Get them on, get them sold, get them sold. Oh, that one fell through. Oh, never mind. On to the next. And unfortunately, so many people, and it's people's lives that end up getting affected by that. And it all comes down to that decision they made. And ultimately, no one forces anybody to go with a particular agent. Nobody does. You know, it's the sellers that make that decision, but it's often because promises were made at the time of the appraisal that were never kept. And, you know, I suppose that leads quite nicely into the thing I did want to share with everybody, especially for all the sellers out there, which is the 4 traps that I shout about what sellers should look out for when they're listing their house. So yeah, if you're happy, I'm
do it. Absolutely do it. Take us through that, please.
So trap number 1 is overvaluing, which is, it's the, you know, one of the oldest tricks in the book. And especially now the market's tough and there are fewer transactions happening and agents are desperate for stock. Overvaluing is obviously the easiest thing to do. And that is basically when an agent goes in, they might look at all the comparables and say the house is worth 300. But they know there's other agents going in and they've got better marketing, or they know that they're a better agent, whatever it may be, or they're under pressure. They've got to get that final instruction by Friday. Otherwise, the area manager is going to be on their back on Monday. They need that instruction. So they think, what can I do? And often the thing they go to is price. So they'll say, if they know it's worth 300, they'll say 330,000, no trouble at all, with no real backing, no evidence, no strategy about how they're going to get to that. But it's like dangling a carrot in front of the seller. Some sellers read through it, some fall for it, and they just see the money and then they start imagining in their head, what can we get for another 30 grand? And for a lot of people, that's the 10% deposit they might need to go to the next house, or the kitchen in the next house. So people start imagining, and then unfortunately that figure sticks in their mind. Even months down the line, they still think, well, the agent said it was worth this. And unfortunately, again, people end up stuck on the market at a high price with no viewings. And we know if you don't get any viewings, you don't get any offers. You don't have any offers, you don't have a sale. So I think always, if an agent is asking or is saying to you, I think I can get this figure, make sure they back it up with comparables and ask them to talk you through how you expect to get to that price. Is it through strategy? Is it through an open event? Is it through their marketing? You know, have they got buyers? You know, ask them to talk. How are you actually going to get to that price? Because all the other agents have said between 275 and 3. You're saying 330. So again, it's that whole thing of just making sure you're holding the agent accountable for it. Trap number 2, which is low fees. So again, talked a little bit about that earlier, but if an agent comes in at a much lower fee, again, don't let the fee be the decision, kind of leading your decision. Just because someone said they'll do it for cheaper doesn't mean they are. And the cheapest agent and the best agent are not always the same thing. Because again, if they're cheaper than everybody else, there might be a reason for it. Do they have, again, what team do they have? What resources do they have? What marketing do they do? Again, it comes around to what are they actually going to do for that fee? Because someone could say you can sell your house for free, but if they're not going to sell it, it doesn't matter. Same if someone says I'm going to charge you 10%. If they don't sell it, they don't get paid anything. So it doesn't matter what the fee is, but people often make a decision based on, oh, I lost one once because I was 0.1% more less. I was 0.1% more. So they went with the other agent because they could save 0.1%. I literally could not believe it. I was like, really? And they said, oh, we like you. Like, no, it must have been something else. I'm a true believer. You don't lose an instruction because of fee. There's other factors in it. But sometimes people do. And I think And the other thing with fees is if you're with an agent, especially if you're on the sofa or the dining table, and that agent's asking for the business and they keep dropping their fee. I got told once of an agent who literally started at like 1.5%. By the time he was going out the front door, he was at 0.5%. He just kept saying, "Oh, what if I do it for 0.5%? Will you sign that?" And they were like, "Look, mate, go away." They literally to the point they asked him to leave because he was that desperate to get the instruction, but he just kept dropping and dropping. And you've got to ask yourself as a seller, is that the person you would want negotiating the price on your most valuable asset, which is your home? If that person drops their fee by half, what are they going to do when a buyer comes along and makes you a low offer? Are they really going to fight to get you a bit more money? Is that the person that you want managing the negotiation? So be very wary of agents that do go in with that low fee option and use it as their leading marketing. I see agents with it on their board, 0.5%. That is literally everything about their marketing. We do the cheapest fees in town. Well, cheaper doesn't always mean better. And I think that's something you've always got to kind of remember when you are looking at it. So be wary of those low fees, especially the fee cutters who keep dropping their fee. Trap number 3 is I have a buyer. Again, this is the classic, where an agent goes in and tells you they have the buyer, just the buyer, and they say, we're the only one who has this buyer, and you've got to think to yourself, just take a step back and think, when you're looking at properties, do you look with one agent? Do you just go to a town and go, do you know what, Blogs and Co, I'm going to stick with Blogs and Co to find a house. I don't care about the other agents. I'm only going to work with Blogs and Co. You don't. You're looking at all the agents. You're viewing everything. And if an agent does say, I've got just the buyer, this is where sneakily what they'll do is do it, or they'll say they've got multiple buyers. Oh, yeah, the one down the road, we had 6 buyers for that one. They probably didn't, but they'll say it. And then the owner says, okay, well, we'll go with you. And they say, oh, maybe we could do a few viewings. So they might decide to do some off-market viewings. But then they'll say, oh, well, look, while we're on that note, could it be all right to take a few photos? I say, oh, yeah, sure, take a few photos. And then they'll go, oh, well, no, I've spoken to all the buyers, and unfortunately, your house isn't the right fit for them. But seeing we've got all the photos, we should put it on the market now. And it's like this segue into, almost making the seller think, oh, well, they've done some work, I'll go with them. But they never had a buyer. Or if they do have a buyer and they say, look, this is a great buyer, I'm the only one, and this will lead into the 4th trap is when, if someone does say, I've got a buyer and they're really keen to say to you, the best thing to say to them is say, yeah, bring them round. I'll sign a 24-hour contract. You're not to take any photos. You're not to list it anywhere for sale. You have 24 hours to contact your buyer and get back in touch with me to book that viewing. And I bet you, in the amount of cases, you will not hear from that agent. And again, I know stories of agents who bring their mates round, all these kind of things that say that, they just say to them, oh, could you do me a favor? Are you free tomorrow? Could you just come and have a look around? And I know agents have been caught out from doing that someone said, oh, no, I knew, well, when the person came around, I knew who the person was. And I knew they were best friends with them and that they're not looking to move. And the agent got caught out. And, it's little things like that you'll be so wary of, which leads, like I said, into the 4th trap, which all the other things tend to revolve around, which is long contracts. Agents that overvalue, agents that underprice on fees, and agents that that say they have buyers will often tie people in for the longest periods. And what you'll find is that the seller will see the price, they'll see the fee, but they'll overlook the sole agency agreement period. It's almost at the end. Oh yeah, you don't have to worry about that. That's that, you're going, and there'll be like 20 weeks in there, or 6 months even. I met someone recently who had a 4-month contract and a 6-week notice period that couldn't be served until 2 weeks before the end of the contract. And the agent's done nothing. They've had 3 viewings. 2 of them, the seller ended up doing, and they'd get a call 5 minutes before to say, oh, I'm really sorry, but something's gone on, someone's ill, something's happened. Can you do the viewing? And they're like, we've already gone out, we're gone. And they're like, oh, the buyer's going to be there in 5 minutes. And the seller had to go back, meet the buyers who they hadn't even called, who were just waiting on the drive. And you just think, but they were stuck. They were stuck with this agent. So, often it's the agents that, the biggest liar gets the job, and they will say everything they need to say, but then they'll tie them in for a long contract and under deliver on absolutely everything. And I think this is where what's wrong about the industry and why people hate estate agents, because agents should be held accountable. If they don't promise on what they deliver, you should be able to sack that agent. And I'll openly say, I work on a 0-week agreement. I don't have a contract. If I say to my clients, if I'm not doing what you expected me to do, sack me, get rid of me. I'd rather you be with an agent you want to work with rather than what I'm facing at the moment, which seems to be everybody is tied into these long contracts. So I can't help them. And often I know agents do it because they're scared of losing business, but I just think that there's no better conviction, than being able to stand in your own truth and deliver on everything you promise. There's no better feeling than being held accountable that you will. And what I say to people is that if an agent does say that they want you for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the week period is, say that's fine. But you can remember, you can amend a contract. It's a contract. You can put things in that contract, say, okay, I'll sign it for the 20 weeks. However, I'd like to put a little side note on there that you will speak to me every week, that you will do every viewing, that you will guarantee me that you'll get me feedback within 48 hours maximum. Because if suddenly you do put the house in the market and you end up doing the viewings, you don't get feedback, you don't get weekly market reports, whatever it is, guess what? You can go to that agent and say, you've broken A, B, and C of our terms, our side terms, therefore contract is null and void, goodbye, I'm going to another agent. But sellers don't do that. They put themselves, unfortunately, they fall into the traps, they get stuck. So yeah, the best bit of advice I can give people is, watch out for that and don't sign that contract.
Mate, I love it. I love it. I love it. But I've got to ask you, why do you care so much?
Because I think people deserve better. I really do. I think that, these tough markets coming up now, we're in a tough market now, and I'm glad, because I really do think that, this is the market where good agents will rise to the top. And I want change in the industry. I want people to be viewed like agents to be viewed as they are in other countries. Like in America, your realtor, a realtor, or however you want to look at it, they're seen in such high regard by people. They're like up there with your doctors, and they're literally seen as these people that you rely on to give you the advice. And unfortunately, again, the British estate agency, it's unfortunately for every one good agent, I think there are 10 bad agents out there. So it is an uphill struggle. But in a way, I kind of hope that this tough market does see the end of some of these bad agents and their old tricks, and people become wise to them. By giving this advice, I want people to be able to go out and have control over who they sell with. And I think that, this is where good agents will really show their true colors, because let's face it, we're in a market now where sellers are living in the past. They want price that their neighbors got a year ago or 2 years ago. And we've got buyers living in a future that seem to think that property prices are going to plummet and it's the worst decision you could ever make buying a house right now. And this is where a good agent, and it comes back again to the people. So to bring back to our original point, that person, their job is to bridge the gap between buyer and seller, to keep advising their seller, to keep advising buyers. And they're the ones that will actually bring the deals together. And the agents that are sat there scratching their backsides waiting for the phone to ring and thinking, why are we so quiet? They're the ones that unfortunately may not be here in 12, 18 months, and I think that's why I do care so much, is because I know a lot of good agents like yourself and so many other agents in the industry that deserve so much more. They deserve to be paid good commissions, and I think, for me, it's such a prominent thing when you look at, I think that, estate agents should get paid for hard work. I think if they're getting paid well because it's hard, it's paid well because it's hard. I think the agents that get paid low, it's because it's easy. And that's the thing. It's at the end of the day, I think that, if the agent's working hard and can provide value, they should get paid well. You tell me many other industries that will work for 6 months without taking a single paycheck from that client. Yeah. It's madness. When you actually think about it, we'll go through all the heartbreak, we can go through the advice we give, and someone can just turn around and say, we're not selling, and walk away without paying a penny. If you did that to a builder, he'd be around with his JCB the next day to knock the extension down. He'd be like, so it's like one of those things that, I think that for what we do and the value we can really deliver is so important to people's lives. Yet, people don't give us that opportunity. And it is from day one, people have tarred us with the same brush. So it's up to the agent to give that perception that they are different, and they are going to be different, and they are going to look after that client. And I think that's why I care so much, is because I don't want to see people in these situations.
Yeah. And I think elite level agents generally follow a process that they know has been painful to get to. And what I mean by that is they've made maybe mistakes, but now see the punches coming. So you've got, like, for example, a mechanic working for a Formula One team is obviously going to be paid a hell of a lot more money than a mechanic that is actually working down the local tyre fitting garage, fitting tyres, because the level of expertise, despite them both being mechanics, the level of expertise of the Formula One guy, who is also working on tyres, is so much more knowledgeable, so much more understanding of the process to deliver maximum results, has to be massively accountable to his team. Whereas the guy that's just got a job Monday to Friday and Saturday mornings is just trying to cut his teeth in the world. And I think that is, to your point about the initial properties being different must be treated appropriately, must have a better understanding of the actual processes. All we're doing right now is we're not even talking about once that property goes under offer. We're just talking about a segment of actually getting that property on the market initially to create the right first impression. Beyond that, how are offers actually molded and shaped in order to deliver the best results? That's not always the highest money. And going back to your point as well, and I completely agree with you, the lowest fee a lot of the time is actually the most expensive, because a lot of agents don't really know what they're doing, or if they do, they're more interested in, I don't want to see the regional manager on Monday morning to tell him why I haven't been instructed again.
Yeah. That's the one you say when it comes down to why do I care so much? Because unfortunately, it's the agent putting themselves first, where it shouldn't be. It should be for the client. And even giving clients advice, I've said it to people, I don't think you should sell the house. When they've said that we want this price and we're not really, if it doesn't feel right, I just say to them, look, maybe now is not the right time for you. But another agent will be sat there saying, I really think you should get it on the market. Oh, don't worry about that. Yeah, I know you haven't finished the extension yet, but it's fine. The buyers will be fine. Get it on the market. Where I'd be saying, look, guys, I think really get that done, because you might find that buyers are going to be put off. They might be worried about, if you haven't finished that, what else haven't you finished? Get that work done. Let's regather in 2 months' time.
Yeah.
It feels right and they're not in a rush to sell. There's no need to pressure them. But other agents say, get it on the market. Let's get on, because like I said, they're thinking, I need the sales. I need the instructions, because area manager's coming in at the end of the week and I need to show him that I've actually listed a few houses this week. And it's unfortunately that's where property's become so transactional. It's become less personable. And for me, it's about having that passion for people, not property. And I think that's kind of the core. What I do is to really listen to the people. What do they want? What's the best thing for them? And making that decision. And if that means not putting the house on for a couple of months because it would suit their lives better, then great. It's like when you see houses going on the market for they're going to buy a new build, but the new build's not ready for a year. So why would you put it on now? But the agent, I'll put it on now. Yeah, you're not going to convince a buyer to wait 12 months to buy the house. They're not going to wait 12 months. So you better say, look, why don't we wait? Pay the reservation fee. As long as the new build company's happy, we'll list it in 6 months' time, and that should give us enough time to get it under offer, and hopefully then it will fall quite nicely in line with when the house is ready. But yeah, it's unfortunately it's like I said, I think it's just agents putting themselves first in too many cases, and yeah, obviously it results in the client losing out.
When I think last thing from me, really, I would say that your vision's the wrong word, but ideology around job interview, I think, is especially important. And also what effect you're actually saying, tell me if I'm wrong, but what you're actually saying, there is a difference between agency business models. One model is service orientated, which is your model, which is all about service, duty of care, doing the right thing, seeing the punches coming, understanding actually what's going to happen, treating every property different because, every property is different, so it must be treated appropriately. Whereas the other business model is around KPIs, around keeping the office doors open, around basically making sure some CEO somewhere can actually be on his yacht in the Maldives. And that's a completely different thing. So I think that's probably the differentiator for sellers, is understanding the business model of the agents that they're talking to.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think, many of us have worked in probably roles and jobs. So a lot of agents out there can relate to this, but, that's aside. What a lot of sellers don't see is what happens behind those doors. And when, there are negotiators, they're being pushed to tell the seller to accept the offer. Even when I've been there before, and I said, I think I can get more, and they said, oh no, just tell them to accept it. Let's just if the seller's happy, tell them to accept it. I'm like, yeah, but I think the buyer will pay more. They've told me that. They said, well, look, the vendor's happy, tell them to accept it. Whereas that should be that hero moment of going back to the seller and say, look, I know you said you take 300, but I've got good news. I got you 310. That seller's going to go, oh my God, you're going to be the golden god. And I think that what we forget is that people don't remember what you did, but they remember how you made them feel. And when you build a business via reputation, people will come back to you in 10 years' time and say, I'm going to sell. I'm not going to sell with anybody else, because I remember that day when you told us we got another 10 grand more. That made such a difference to us on the next house. It covered all our moving costs. And that's the magic moments. And unfortunately, that gets taken away, I think, from a lot of young negotiators sometimes in those situations, because there's too much pressure to just get the deal done. And I think it's being able to be in a position to create those magic moments that people remember, and then they talk about when they're down the pub. You know, they hear, I've had a recommendation from someone. So literally, we just heard someone overheard someone talking next to us about selling a house, and they literally just said, "Oh, sorry, did you say so? If you're going to use anyone, you need to speak to Alex." You know, literally, and they say, you know, we've used them in the past, and it's those little moments where someone rings you up and says, "Oh yeah, you know, John and June at number 24 told us we've got to use you." There's nothing better than getting that phone call, because you know, you go in there, and you say, "Look, this is the fee," and they go, "Yeah, whatever, great, let's do it." And there's no better feeling than going into instruction like you've already won it, and having that feeling that you walk out there thinking, not that the job is easy, but you just think, you know, everything you've done over the last 5, 10, 15 years has got you to that point. And that's, you know, I think where every agent would love to get to, is that you could just roll into any instruction. They go, "Alex, whatever you say, we'll go with it." There is no better feeling. And then you know that you get the result, rather than, unfortunately, in a lot of other cases, it's like, "Oh, we're not paying this. We want to list at this." And I just say, "Fine, I'm not the agent for you. Use somebody else." You know, there's nothing. I've got other clients who are willing to pay me that fee. I've got other clients that are willing to take my advice on. If you're not willing to accept it, fine. Best of luck to you. And I think that's, you know, that for me, there's no better feeling.
Alex, mate, I completely agree with everything you've said. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. You've been an absolute gem. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you for having me.